A big hello and welcome. It's Kate from Zen Stitching, and I'm super excited that you're joining us today for another one of our conversations with the artists who are taking part in Making Zen. And today I have the pleasure of joining Betz White. Hello, Betz. It's so lovely to see you again.
Hi, great to see you too.
It's so cool because Betz is joining us for the second time in Making Zen, and Betz is the most amazing textile artist who I would say specializes in stitching and felting and probably all things textiles. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself, Betz?
Sure. That's a good intro. Thank you. My background is actually in fashion design, and I worked in the fashion industry for 19, 20 years. And then I kind of pivoted, and I've been online doing my crafts and sewing, blogging since 2006. So I'm an OG. And then over the course of time, I've pivoted and done a lot of things. I've written 3 different books. I teach online. I teach in person. I kind of do it all. But sort of the underlying thing through it all is fabric and textiles and texture and fiber. That's just my thing. So yeah, so that's just really I'm always like I always have my hands in something, and I kind of have my main things that I do, but then I'm also like on the edges trying different things. So
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I think a lot of textile artists can identify because there's so many techniques within the realm of textiles, isn't there? So you can really go from sewing clothes through to knitting, through to weaving, through to printing on fabric and many other processes and techniques as well that I haven't even mentioned there. I love hearing that you started off life as a textile designer and then progressed into doing handcrafts and hand designs. Could you share a little bit of your journey about that process?
well, so I was in the fashion industry designing kids apparel. So I worked at a couple of different big manufacturers like Carter's and Land's End. And so I was in charge of the girls' playwear and the baby layette things. And that was, designing the silhouettes and sourcing fabrics and, coming up with collections. And I did have some involvement with the actual like textile development and working with artists to sort of come up with artwork for themes that we had, around our collections. So I wasn't actually doing the artwork. I mean, I did a couple of times, but mostly it was working with artists that did that. So, so that was really handy when I sort of evolved into doing the whole like crafting blog business. It kind of was serendipitously like evolved into a business. But I eventually designed a couple fabric collections for quilting cottons. And so even though I didn't do like juvenile prints, that background in the apparel industry really helped because I had, worked with artists and seen, how the fabrics were printed and went to the mills and did strike offs and like all that, all that behind the scenes stuff that I think is so cool. So I feel like that really, informed what I did, for my own business going forward.
Oh, how fascinating. So it sounds like it was just a natural progression. You became more interested in designing the fabrics and then moving away and into the handcrafts some more. That's really lovely to hear that progression, particularly because there's a few fashion designers who are part of Making Zen this time round, and how they've got started in the fashion industry and then moved away for different reasons and into things that I think more speak to them now as well. And I'm curious because one of the things that I've heard come up a couple of times is the waste that the fashion industry generates and that kind of side of things. Was that ever something on your periphery when that was all when you were involved with that side of your life?
Um, Not really. I'm trying to think. I think I left the fashion industry. Well, well, I left after my kids were born, my second kid. So it was like early 2000s. And a lot of what I did, well, so it's kind of a two-part thing. I mean, part of it was I left because I had little kids, and I was lucky because I was able to shift to part-time and kind of do both. But straddling that world is like almost impossible as well. So then I shifted to just being a stay-at-home mom, but also kind of freelancing, and then I sort of got into the craft blog thing, and I was doing a lot of upcycled wool, sweater, felting kind of things. And that's actually my first book, Warm Fuzzies, was based on that. So so I started there, and then just not really thinking about the fashion industry specifically, but more thinking about like my crafting, and what was kind of happening in the craft blog world was the whole upcycling movement and reuse and all that. So I kind of just serendipitously fell into it. And then my second book is Sewing Green, which was all about upcycling and repurposing things beyond felted wool sweaters. Like I would go to the thrift stores and I would just see like, okay, beyond the sweater rack, there's all this stuff. And that's really when it started connecting to me, not so much while I was in the fashion industry, but like after I left it, I realized, wow, this is kind of a problem. So
Thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing that. I had no idea that your first two books were about upcycling and working with, say, sweaters that have been washed one too many times.
yes.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
And that's just wonderful. It's and thank you for elaborating a little bit more on the journey. It really does sound like it was just a natural progression to start working in this way, and it makes sense because the works that I was first drawn to you that I had seen of yours were your upcycling of sweaters and mending little holes by creating something beautiful. So yeah, it looks like you've got oh wow.
Right. So last year when I taught for Making Zen, I taught embroidery on knits. And so this was one of my first sweaters. So this was a thrifted sweater that I embroidered with tapestry wool. So like DMC tapestry wool. You can also do it with any stash yarns that you have. And this was to simulate a vintage look, a vintage sweater. But I just took a plain cardigan and zhuzhed it up. So
That's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing, because it really is such a wonderful way to breathe life into our clothes. If they have a stain on them, you can embroider to either cover it up or make it look like it's a feature
right.
to be there. And if you have moth holes and things like that, then you can also mend and repair and also turn it into something beautiful as well, which is lovely, because I think sometimes we look at our clothes that have the stains on them or they have the holes in them, and our first response is, it's no good anymore, we'll just have to throw it out. Kind of thing. But quite often the clothes that have the holes in them and the stains on them, they're the favorite clothes because they get worn all the time, which is why they have the holes and the stains. So it's really a lovely way of extending the clothes that you love to wear.
Right.
Anyway. Yes. And so you showed us an example of what you taught for the last Making Zen Online Retreat. I'd love to see what you're going to share with us for this time round.
All right. So it's kind of springboarding off that. Often when I teach the embroidery on knits, people ask about the mending part, and I primarily teach it as an embellishment. It can hide holes and stains and whatnot, but I haven't really taught the actual like mending part. And so I usually suggest, well, you just mend it however you want to mend it. And even if it's kind of an unsightly mend, then that's when you embellish on top. But I'm kind of just always been interested in wool, all things wool. And so over the course of my time with felted wool sweaters and such, I've dabbled in needle felting. And so kind of as an evolution of the embroidery on knits is doing some needle felting and then adding some embroidery to that. So let's see if you can get this up here. So this is a little sweater scrap, and I've needle felted the flower pot, and then I've added some embroidery with floss to embellish that. So if you had a little hole or a stain or something like that, you could needle felt on top. And so I'll be teaching that. And then just because I can't leave it alone, I have to do something else. I added the little flowers, and then I have a little toadstool, so you can do, the needle felted toadstool, then some little French knots and some little grass. And it's super cute. The felting really is secure. So if you have a smallish hole, that's all you need to really kind of seal it up. Mm-hmm. And I think if you had a bigger hole, you might want to do a little more, structural repair, maybe a patch behind it or something. But the needle felting can go a long way. And then, so those two are sweater examples. And so I've been experimenting with other fabrics because you don't just get holes in sweaters, right? So I have this little strawberry, and it's super fun because you can blend the wool so that it's wool roving, so, unspun wool roving, and you use a little tool that's got little. I'll do what the makeup ladies do. I'll put my hand in front of me. Anyway, it's got little needles that are sharp with barbs, and when you stab through it, it adheres to the, it kind of adheres to itself, but it goes through the sweater or the fabric, and it like felts just by the friction, and then there you have it. So. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about all kinds of different fabrics you can do, little, tips and pitfalls. And I'm going to share, I'm still workshopping the name, but I'm either calling it mini mends or doodle darns.
Ooh.
Gotta have alliterations.
I like alliteration. I'm always the same. Oh, that is so much fun. And what a beautiful way of adding an element of interest to clothing, mending at the same time, if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, just have a little, or you can do like a whole yoke. Anyway.
Oh, I love it because I have a wool sweater that's coming apart. It's a machine knitted, very tiny knit.
Fine gauge.
And it's coming apart at the neck seam, and sewing it together, it's not working. So doing something like that and kind of turning it into like a decorated yoke would be a wonderful idea to embellish it and also mend it at the same time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'd say there's probably a lot of people out there who have got similar kind of holes in sweaters that they can also add to their sweater as well. Right.
Yeah, little visible mending. So
yes,
I think among the cuffs too is a pretty common area that has some wear that you could kind of patch up and embellish. So
that's very true. Yes, those areas of high wear. So yes, that's around those areas too. But I can imagine that after your workshop, people will be mending all kinds of different things, or embellishing is probably the way to describe it, whether or not there are holes underneath.
Right.
Yeah. And I love hearing, so your focus at the moment is pretty much wool, whether it's felted knits, or just a felt, I guess you'd call it, for want of a better word, and then adding stitching to it. I'd love to hear what else you're working on at the moment.
Okay, well, I just happen to have some samples here. So I'm really loving applique work right now. So, of course, embroidery, but just bringing in that wool applique. So this is wool felt. and I'm just always, a fan of felt. So it's called Fresh Start. I designed this a year or two ago. So just, very springy and fresh.
And is that Bet's, is that on a fabric background with the wool embroidered on top, or is it a wool
Right. So this is linen,
linen?
and with the applique work on top. And I just find that it makes embroidery so, well, I don't know if it makes it faster, but it just has a different look than being very linear. You're not filling in a lot of, satin stitches or whatever. You can get pops of color a little more easily when you use felt. Plus, it just, adds that dimension.
Yes.
So I really like it for that. Here's another group that I did. So this was 4 individual little designs, and then I showed how to put it together into patchwork.
Amazing.
My most recent guy is this little tissue box. It looks like a birdhouse. So I recently started a Patreon page, and this is one of the projects in there. So like a really simple pattern piece to fit over the box, and then the applique work just to embellish. So
Delightful. Can we see all 4 sides of that?
Oh, sure.
So there are designs on all 4 sides? Yep.
So this has got a little reverse applique, so it looks, kind of like the doorway. And then we have like little cherry blossoms, and then I have another doorway on the back with it's supposed to be a goldfinch.
It's lovely. It's
And
so
and some
beautiful.
flowers, and so
I love it. And I love the way that the roof kind of helps funnel those tissues out as well.
yeah, that was a little bit of an engineering thing. I wanted to figure out how to make it roof-like, but not too complicated. And so all 4 sides are basically the same pattern piece, and it sort of funnels up into the roof.
It's beautiful. And I love seeing that you're combining, like you say, the applique with the stitching. Do you like to use wool thread when you do the stitching, or do you use cotton thread, or do you use a bit of both? How do you approach that?
Well, for the kind of finer, felt and delicate details, I use pearl cotton. So I don't know if you can really see here. Some of this is variegated, but it's hard to see, I guess. So I love that, and it kind of reminds me of sock yarn with all the, subtle variations. So that adds a lot of depth and dimension. And then, of course, like on the sweater, I use the tapestry wool because it's, more of a bulky thing. So I guess I use both.
Yeah, just depending on what kind of effect you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's so much fun. I love seeing that. Do you also, as part of your textile adventures, do you also knit, or you more work with upcycled knits?
I do knit. And I've been crocheting. I'm not a big crocheter, but I got into this whole like granny square kick. So I've been doing a lot of that. When I went to school for fashion design, I learned how to knit on a knitting machine, which is it's kind of like a loom, but instead of for weaving, it's knitting. It has like a big bed with 200 like latch hook needles and a carriage that you push back and forth. So it's very manual the way that a loom is. It's not cheating. It's just a different kind of knitting. But I bought one. It's this vintage. I think it was 1970 is the age of my machine. It's very yellowed, but it's so cool. I mean, because you can knit a whole row just once you get it all set up in a swoosh. And so I've done some yarn bombing, which is like, wrapping lampposts and trees and things like that. So doing kind of like public art. I love doing that. I've got a project coming up. I got an art grant to do a project here in the town that I live in. So I'm going to have to get the knitting machine out again.
Oh, that sounds cool. What are you doing? I'd love to hear more about it.
Well, I don't have my elevator pitch down real tight for it exactly, but it's a yarn bombing exhibit, and it's based on social and political causes and protecting things. So my whole point about my application for this grant was that I was worried about protecting various things, like, for example, the environment. So I'm going to yarn bomb a globe. So it'll be knitted and wrapped, and sort of thinking about knitting and creating a thing like a blanket is to care for. You're protecting something, you're caring for it, you're just wrapping it in your handwork, right? So I'm going to be yarn bombing a globe and a scale, like a balance scale, like for justice. And I have a bullhorn, like a megaphone, for free speech. And so I'm going to have like 5 or 6 different pieces that are in this exhibit. So anyway, it looks great in my head. I hope it comes out.
Well, I think that's a good starting point, isn't it? You've got to have the inspiration, and then the magic will happen through the fingers.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So
I love it. So it's an exhibition that you're working towards, and that will happen later this year, or what kind of time?
right. So it kind of has 2 phases. The first phase is in June. I'm going to be exhibiting one piece at the Pride Festival. So I'm going to be doing a big rainbow, and so that will be sort of like a photo op thing that you can stand in front of. That's knitted. It's going to be 6 feet tall. Is my goal.
Wow.
I got to get started on it because it's coming up. And then the other pieces and that will be together in the fall in the Community Arts Center. We'll have an exhibit there. So
Oh, how much fun. Well, it is good that you have a knitting machine then, because that will speed up that knitting process
right.
just a bit. Yeah. And how much fun. Have you worked with one before?
I have. So I learned how to use it in college, and then I bought one shortly after college, and I've been playing with it intermittently, put it away when I had kids, pulled it out again later. It's got a pretty steep learning curve, and it can be super frustrating, but when it works, it's so cool. And there's all kinds of little communities around, troubleshooting, when you have issues with it or finding parts and things like that. I used to live in Maryland, and there was a yarn shop in Alexandria or it's still there. It's called Fiberspace. Great yarn shop. And they commissioned me to do a couple yarn bombings for them. So one time I did 6 lampposts that were on the street in front of their shop. And then another time, my favorite one, I covered a bicycle. So it was a new bike, but it kind of had a vintage look. And I basically knit to cover like all the tubes of the bike and the fenders and the handlebars with tassels and pom-poms in the seat and everything. It turned out really cool. And they had it parked. Well, at first they had it in the window, and then they had it parked out front. And it was a nice, thing to attract people, and it was a great project.
Yeah, I would say. I just the talking about the knitting machine. I know I found one in a thrift store many years ago with great intentions of figuring out how to work it, and of course it languished under the bed, and I think it made its way back to a thrift store again afterwards.
They do that. It takes some commitment because it's, like I said, it's got a pretty steep learning curve, and it can be
Yes.
very finicky, and you can be knitting along and everything's great, and all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, the whole thing falls on the floor. Not the machine, but all of your knitting will fall off the machine, and then you have to start over. So
Yes, yes. I think that was probably part of the reason why it languished under the bed. I got it out with enthusiasm, and then because it was, it's big chunky. It's kind of like a big zipper in a sense.
yeah,
Um, you're moving this thing backwards and forwards, and it makes like this great rattling sound. And when it worked, like you say, it's fabulous. But it didn't work more often than it did work.
yeah.
And back
Yep.
then we didn't have the internet, and so there was troubleshooting. It was quite challenging. So,
Right. Yep.
oh, I love hearing that though. How much fun that you've got one and that you're using it for your art projects at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. And I love hearing that you're going to be doing all of these things and connecting, the domestic arts, which is like as we associate it with wrapping ourselves with love and warmth and cozy, and then taking it into the public domain and wrapping objects that you wouldn't expect to have wrapped in
Right.
wool, in those kind of things. And so I'm curious, the objects that you're talking about, are they in the public domain but in an exhibition space, or are they like, say, sculptures in the public domain that you'll be wrapping with the wool?
So I'm finding the various things to wrap, like at the thrift store, or the rainbow we're going to build. My husband's going to help me because at Pride it's going to be freestanding outside, so we're a little worried about like wind and things
Oh,
like that.
yeah.
So he's really good at the structure part, so he's going to help me with the structure. And then the other pieces are going to be, like the globe is this big. And I got one on Facebook Marketplace, and I got a wheelchair because that's for, caring for disabled and the elderly. So I got one that's it doesn't really work, and I was able to get it to use for this. And then one other component that is really fun, I think, fun and useful, when you do a public outdoor yarn bombing, a lot of times people get frustrated because they think it's a waste of resources to be, using all this yarn on a lamppost that gets rained on, and it's not a cozy thing for a person. And so my goal with the rainbow is that the stripes will be knit in tubes, and then you can, after the exhibit, I'll take that and make it into hats.
Oh, fun.
And that, because it's an easy cinch it at the end and roll it up, basically. And then donate those to different charities that clothe homeless people and people that need hats. So
What a fabulous idea.
yeah, so I thought that's it should be okay outside at Pride, like it shouldn't get dirty. And then I'm also going to have there's like round small knitting machines that they sell now.
Oh, yes.
It's like a Addy Turbo, maybe I forget what it's called, but it's basically for making hats that you turn a crank. And so I'll have that at the Pride exhibit as well, where people can, give a few cranks and knit a few inches, and then that'll like also go into the hat making. So
Oh, cool. Oh, I can imagine everyone's going to have a ball with that.
yeah.
Yeah, people just love it. It's really interesting, isn't it? Whether it's working on a loom or something, it kind of really engages everybody. And I think not just women who are interested in knitting, but men for the technical aspects and how it all works together, because it's quite logical, would you say?
Right. Yeah. The mechanical aspect of it is interesting. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're interested in how things work at all, it's, you get to see all those moving parts. And if you think about it, I mean, all of that has kind of been taken away from us in a sense, when things are planned, the planned obsolescence where you can't open the printer, to fix it, or you can't open whatever it is. Things are made in a way that either you throw it away or you have to get a repair person to deal with it, and we've lost that ability to fix things. So it's really cool when you can actually see the mechanics of a thing making another thing.
Oh, it is. It's mesmerizing. I love watching that kind of stuff. And even it makes me think of, you see inside factories and like the bottles move along the conveyor belt and then something sticks labels to them and then something else does something else. And you're just kind of watching this mechanical process,
Right.
creating things. Yeah.
Well, and that kind of loops me back to the beginning when we were talking about my experience in the fashion industry. And so many things are made overseas that when you're in when you're a designer in the industry, I think you don't really, I think maybe sometimes people still travel to the factories and things like that. I mean, obviously somebody does, but if you're in, an office as a designer, you may or may not have that. You probably don't have like that sample room right there. The way back in the 90s, we had that. And I was also able to go on the strike-offs of, that's what they call like a test print run when they do the fabrics. And I loved going into the mill and just the giant rolls of fabric and then, them printing one color at a time and then like seeing the fabric come off. And basically what they would do is they would set it up and they would cut off a chunk and then they would bring it to me or the other designer in this little room with this, the light box, and you would look at it and you would, say the pink needs to be a little bluer and the black is, too heavy, and you would critique it and then they would go back and they would tweak things and print it again.
That sounds like so much fun.
But anyway, that was really cool.
Yeah.
To be able to see, and it was very impactful as a young person, in the industry to see like, wow, so, the artist I worked with drew this little flower, and then like, that's a lot of fabric, like to see, like, that's a lot of people working to make this little onesie with the flower on it, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
anyway.
And it's when you start thinking about it, it really is mind-boggling to think of the chain of people that are involved for every step of the way to create a finished object in our garments, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because like you say, the 90s, and that to me seems like yesterday. It's amazing how the production process has changed in what I feel is a very short period of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, even the whole quality thing, like finding the wool sweaters, like Warm Fuzzies, my book that was the upcycling of the sweaters and the projects, that came out in 2007. Is that right? Yeah. And I could find wool sweaters, and now it's really hard to find wool sweaters. I mean, people complained then that they couldn't find wool sweaters, but now it's really hard. Which is another reason why you should hold on to yours and upcycle it with cute little doodads. But now I find when I go to the thrift store, not just the wool sweater thing, but the quality of the secondhand stuff is even less quality of the secondhand stuff in the past, which makes sense if all the quality is going down. But it's just interesting and kind of sad that to see all of that there and realize like even this is not worth buying to wear again. A lot of it, So,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I know when I like to buy things from the thrift store, I always look for garments that are made from 100% natural materials, and that's becoming increasingly more difficult to find. And
Yeah.
it's quite interesting how that kind of concept isn't really readily available for a lot of the garments that are made these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's for crazy reasons too. I mean, obviously cost is one of them and speed for fast fashion. But I've heard podcasts talk about, the weight of the garments in a shipping container. Like a whole container full of cotton sweaters is going to be a lot heavier than a whole container full of acrylic sweaters, or a blend of the two. If they blend it with fibers that don't weigh as much, then it's less for shipping. And it's like, really, this is because of shipping? Like,
Ah,
it's not about fashion and design necessarily.
that's amazing. What an interesting consideration. It makes complete sense when you think
Yeah.
about it, but who'd have thought?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
fascinating topic.
Oh, it is. It really is, and that's another rabbit hole that we could dive into
Definitely.
with great delight. Actually, it's an area of interest for me, and I could spend a lot of time talking about it. But we're talking about you and all of the beautiful things that you like to create with your embroidery kits and your designs and the men's. I'm just looking at your Instagram page now, and you've also got some beautiful woven circles on your page as well. Would you like to share a little bit about those?
I don't have any within arm's reach, but that's just another like avenue of playing with fiber. I think you're talking about the circular weavings that I've done in embroidery hoops.
Yes.
So those are really fun. I've been teaching that locally. So it's like a really nice entry level into weaving. So most people are familiar with the hoop, and it's pretty easy to wrap the warp on it and weave with whatever yarn fiber that you have. I'm teaching another one the end of this month locally that is all with upcycled materials. So cutting your denim into strips, making t-shirt yarn, which is really fun to do. So back to the thrift store. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And is there any other projects on the horizon that you'd like to share with us?
That's it, really. Like I mentioned, the Patreon that I started. So I just started that a month ago. I've got this is my, one of the projects in there. I'm also doing kind of like a best of Betz thing where I'm going back to some of the projects from my books because they were published a while ago, and kind of refreshing them and offering those to the patrons. And I'm keeping that founding membership really low. It's just $5 a month because I really feel like I want to keep it accessible. Things are crazy. People are, feeling the pinch. And I just feel like, if I could get enough people to join in and want to have that connection and community, and that, if we get enough people, I can continue to offer, creative things. And I'm really like tuning into more of using scraps and what you have, and, shopping opportunities are less. Like Joann's closed, and I know people don't have access to, any sort of fabric on, any given day. So like, what do we have? What can we use? And what can we make? So I know we all have scraps of things. So that's sort of my focus there. So I'm excited about that. I've got like a good little base of people, and I feel like, the more the merrier, and I'm just excited for people to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good sentiment. I think when we create with our hands, it's always a great way of coming to be mindful of what is happening in the world around us, and a great way of reconciling that and feeling at peace. Or sometimes just immersing ourselves in those projects gives us a few moments of happiness where we're so focused on the creative process that we forget the world around us. And we can also process it at the same time. And I love the ethos behind it too, where you're working with scraps, working with things that we'd have lying around. Because yes, most people who like to dabble in the textile arts generally have one or two or more cupboards full of things to use. So I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and a great way to recycle and bring joy to people's lives.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pleased that you're going to be sharing that goal with the Making Zen community too. Thank you so much for your time today, Betz. It's been so lovely chatting with you. Thank you for joining me in this creative journey. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if you'd like to learn more about Making Zen, please check out the links below where you can find out all about the workshops and creativity, community, and all that kind of good stuff. Wishing you many happy hours of stitching.